All right, the unit circle, this is really day 3, but that's fine. Okay, so the unit circle is a circle used in trigonometry that has a radius of 1. That's really all it is, and we just use it a lot. Okay, so let's look at this little triangle we have drawn over here. That length right there on the bottom, that horizontal length, is x, because that's the x-axis. That vertical length is y, because that's the y-axis. Okay, and then the radius is 1, because it's the unit circle, the radius is always 1, so the hypotenuse is 1. So let's find sine of that angle. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is y, hypotenuse is 1, so sine corresponds with y. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is x over 1, which is just x. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent, which is y over x. Okay, so sine corresponds with y, cosine corresponds with x, and then tangent is y over x. Okay, and the coordinates can be written as cosine of theta, sine of theta, because it's x, y. That's the same thing as x, y. Cosine of theta, sine of theta. Okay, let's get into this. So there are a ton of different angles on this. Really, there's infinitely many. But a full rotation is 360 degrees. So that's as far as we're going to go. So there's 0, and then if you go up 90 degrees, that's 90. Another 90 is 180, then 270, and then 360. And then we're going to focus a lot just in this first quadrant. We have the 30-degree angle, the 45-degree angle, and the 60-degree angle. Okay, and we're going to use the 30, 60, 90 triangle to find these ratios, and the 45, 45, 90 triangle to find these ratios. That's why it was so important that we knew these. Okay, so let's just first start with 0 degrees or 360 degrees. So 0 degrees as radians is just 0 radians. Then 360 degrees as radians is 2 pi radians. And remember, to convert to radians, you do 360 times pi over 180. And you just reduce that, because that's 360 pi over 180, which equals 2 pi. Okay? So sine of theta, remember sine corresponds with the y value. The y value at 0 degrees is 0. Cosine corresponds with the x value. So the x value right there is 1. Tangent is y over x. So that's 0 over 1, which equals 0. So the point right there at 0 degrees, this point right here, is 1, 0. Okay, let's look at 30 degrees. So first, let's convert that to radians. So that's 30 times pi over 180, which is 30 pi over 180, which is pi over 6. Now we have to find the sine of that. So let's just look at our triangle down here. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's x over 2x. Those x's cancel. That's 1/2. Okay, cosine of 30 degrees is x squared to 3 over 2x. Those x's cancel, and that's the square root of 3 over 2. Now tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's x over x squared to 3. Those x's cancel. I get 1 over the square root of 3, and then we have to rationalize the denominator. So multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, and you end up with the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, and then that point right there is the square root of 3 over 2, comma, 1/2. Okay, so 45 degrees. Let's convert it to radians. So 45 times pi over 180 reduces to pi fourths. Now the sine of that is x over x squared to 2. because it's opposite over hypotenuse, which is 1 over the square root of 2, which is the square root of 2 over 2 after you rationalize that denominator. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's x over x squared to 2, which is 1 over the square root of 2, which is the same as sine, so that's the square root of 2 over 2. And then tangent is x squared to 2, tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's x over x, which is 1. Now that point right there is the square root of 2 over 2, comma, square root of 2 over 2. Okay, let's go to 60 degrees. So convert that to radians. 60 times pi over 180 is pi thirds. So let's go to 60, and let's find the sine of that. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so that's x squared to 3 over 2x. Those x's cancel, and that's the square root of 3 over 2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so x over 2x. X's cancel, that's 1/2. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's x squared root of 3 over x, which equals the square root of 3. So that point right there is 1/2, comma, the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, let's go to 90 degrees. So first we're going to convert that to radians. So 90 times pi over 180 reduces to pi halves. Now sine, again, is my y value. So my y value right there is 1. Cosine is my x value. My x value is 0. Tangent is y over x, so that's 1 over 0. You cannot divide by 0, so that's undefined. Then that point right there is 0, 1. Okay, 180. So let's first convert that to radians. So that's 180 times pi over 180, which is just pi. So sine of 180, sine is my y value, is 0. Cosine of 180, my x value, is -1. Tangent is y over x, so 0 over -1, which is 0. And then my point right there is -1, 0. Okay, and then let's go to 270. So, change that to radians, so that's 270 times pi over 180, which reduces to 3 pi halves. Now sine is my y value, so that's -1. Cosine is my x value, that's 0. Tangent is y over x, so that's -1 over 0, which you cannot divide by 0, so that's undefined. And that point right there is 0, comma, -1. Okay, all of this right here is very important to remember. It's very important to remember how you got these. Okay, and if you got a little confused with this, we're going to go over it a ton more in class next time. So just make sure you come ready to do this, okay? We're not done with this video, sorry. But, okay, which trig functions are positive in the first quadrant, second quadrant, third, and fourth? So all students take calculus. That means the first quadrant is everything. So all of the sine, cosine, and tangent are positive in that first quadrant. Second one is sine, students, sine. Third one is tangent, take, tangent. Fourth one is cosine. So all students take calculus. Calculus. Okay? All students take calculus. That's just a way to remember. And that first quadrant is always the top right, and then you move counterclockwise. It's the same way that we draw angles. So, because the right side is 0, and then you go up to 90, 180, 270. It's the same thing. So all students take calculus. All sine, tangent, cosine. Okay? So let's look at A. If tangent is greater than 1, which quadrants could the terminal side, or greater than 0, which quadrants could the terminal side of theta lie? So where is tangent positive? Well, it's positive in the first quadrant, not the second. It's positive in the third quadrant, not the fourth. So it's either the first or the third. Okay? Let's look at B. If secant is less than 0, which quadrant could the terminal side lie in? Well, secant is the opposite of cosine. So secant and cosine go together. So we want to know where secant is less than 0. So we need to know where cosine is less than 0. So cosine is positive in the first quadrant, so it's not that one. It's negative in the second quadrant, so it's that one. Negative in the third quadrant, so that one. Positive in the fourth. So this is the second and the third. Okay. If sine is greater than 0, which quadrants could that lie in? Well, that's the first and the second. This one, if cosine is less than 0 and cotangent is greater than 0. So let's first figure out where cosine is less than 0. Cosine is less than 0 in the second or third quadrants. Cotangent is greater than 0, so that means when cotangent is positive, which means when tangent is positive, so that's the first or the third. So the third quadrant is where that one will lie. Okay? Now let's get into this right here. So first I want to talk about, is there a way, I'm going to change this real quick. So I want to talk about reference angles real quick because I didn't go over it in the last video. So say we have an angle of, let me change this color. Say we have an angle of 49 degrees. Okay, that angle is going to be about right there. Okay, the reference angle is always the angle with the x-axis. And since this is in the first quadrant, my reference angle here, reference angle, is 49 degrees. It doesn't change in that first quadrant. Okay, let's say we have an angle of 124 degrees. Now this one is going to go to about right there. Draw that, and we need to drop this down. Okay, we need to find this angle right there. To find that, I'm going to use 180. So I'm going to do 180 minus 124, and that is 56. So my reference angle there is 56. Okay, these bottom two quadrants is where it gets a little bit more confusing. So let's say we have 249 degrees. Wait, yeah, that works. So 249 degrees, that's going to be about right there. Draw that down. It's this angle right there. Now, I told you guys to go to the next one and then subtract from there. Don't do that. So we're going to do 249, and we're always going to use 180 and 360. So 249 minus 180, which is 69 degrees. So my reference angle right here is 69 degrees. Okay, let's do one last one in that last quadrant. So say we are given 307. So I'm going to just graph that. That's going to be about right there. And I need to find this angle right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 360, subtract 307, and that gives me, 53 degrees. That's the reference angle there. Okay, so always work with 180 and 360. Don't ever use 90, don't ever use 270. It's always 180 and 360 because we're working with the x-axis, so we have to use those measurements, not the measurements on the y-axis. Okay, hopefully that clears up a little bit confusion on that. All right, how do I go back now? Okay, so now we're going to use that information to find exact values of trig functions. So we have the sine of 150 degrees. We need to find the reference angle. So first, 150 degrees is in the second quadrant. So to find that reference angle, I'm going to do 180 minus 150. That gives me 30. So I need to find the sine of 30. Now sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's x over 2x if I use this little triangle over here, which is 1/2. Now this is in the second quadrant. So that's all students take calculus. That should have a second U in there. So sine is positive in the second quadrant, so that stays as positive 1/2. Okay, let's do 300. So 300 is in the fourth quadrant. Find that reference angle. That's 360 minus 300, which is 60 degrees. So I'm going to find the tangent of 60 degrees. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Those x's cancel, and that's the square root of 3. Now that's in the fourth quadrant, so all students take calculus. Cosine is the only thing positive in that fourth quadrant, so that's a negative square root of 3. Okay, cosine of 225, that's in the third quadrant. So I'm going to do 225, subtract 180, I get 45. So I'm going to find the cosine of 45 degrees. Cosine is opposite over hypotenuse. No, it's not. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's x over x squared to 2, which is 1 over the square root of 2. Rationalize that denominator. So that's the square root of 2 over 2. Now, this is in the third quadrant. So all students take, so tangent is the only thing positive in that third quadrant. So that's a negative square root of 2 over 2. Okay? Now, I want you guys to do D, E, and F. And you should get -1, square root of 3, and then 2. Okay, let's go down to G. So first we're going to convert to degrees, because I just think degrees are way easier to work with. So 11 pi over 6 is 330 degrees. Now that's in quadrant 4. Find the reference angle, so that's 360 minus 330 is 30. Cosine of 30 is x squared to 3 over 2x, because that's adjacent over hypotenuse. Those x's cancel, and that's the square root of 3 over 2. Now this is in the fourth quadrant, so all students take calculus, so that's the square root of 3 over 2. Now cosecant of 7 pi fourths. So cosecant, change that to degrees first, that's cosecant of 315. 315 is in the fourth quadrant. To find our reference angle, 360 minus 315 is 45. So we have to find the cosecant of 45. Now cosecant is opposite of hypotenuse. What am I saying? Is opposite of sine. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, which means cosecant will be hypotenuse over opposite. So this is going to be the x squared to 2 over x, which is the square root of 2. Okay, let's do sine. Oh, wait. Yeah, sorry. So this is in the fourth quadrant, so all students take calculus. Cosine and secant are the only things positive in that fourth quadrant. So cosecant is negative, which makes that a negative square root of 2. Convert this one to degrees, so that's sine of 240. That's quadrant 3. So that's going to be 240 minus 180 equals 60. So sine of 60, opposite over hypotenuse, that's x squared to 3 over 2x, which is the square root of 3 over 2. Now that's in the third quadrant, so all students take that tangent is the only positive thing in that third quadrant. So sine is negative, and that's negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay, you guys do these last ones. There's those answers. So -1, -1/2, and then undefined. Okay? Remember to take the quiz. I'm so sorry that this was so long. I will make it up to you guys.